All right, this show is brought to you by Panini America, makers of the most collectible sports cards on the planet, the Luminance Football Card Series. We've got a box right here. Features NIL autograph cards from players including Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, and Luther Burden. We're going to actually start ripping some packs here over the next few days on the show, so just stay tuned for that. But to start collecting, visit PaniniAmerica.net. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3, presented by Wendy's. And of course, it is a Wendy's Saucy Take Wednesday. I've got takes for you. We got maybe the sauciest takes coming up later in the show from our guest, Doug Lesmerises, one of Ari's former coworkers and one of the kings of the North.
I got to tell you, man, I don't know what you have in store for me for takes today. I don't even know what direction they're coming from, who they're going to be about, what the thought's going to be. I don't know if it's going to get spicier than the segment we had with Doug, but I thought that was pretty interesting because you do have a season right now where Northern teams are doing quite well. And the way that the sport is set up and the fact that they're able to assemble rosters in a different way than maybe they could 5, 6, 7 years ago has made for quite the exciting season. And I'm excited to hear what Doug has to say about that.
Yeah, I am too, because this is a different year. Like, everything is different. I have a feeling we're going to get some Dear Andy questions about Alabama, and then we're going to probably talk about that on tomorrow's show. A lot of, would this have happened under Saban, and how different are they, and like this is just existential crisis stuff. But I think North, South, everywhere, it's like Big Cat said, the sport has flattened quite a bit. And it's made for some unpredictable results. It's helping us with the saucy takes, I'll tell you that. So let us get right to the saucy takes presented by Wendy's. These are, of course, presented by Wendy's Saucy Nuggs. You know the flavors: garlic parm, honey barbecue, buffalo, and the hot variations of all of those. And I highly recommend the hot variations of all of those. They also have the spicy ghost pepper, which is amazing. So grab some extra napkins, pick your favorite flavor, prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. The Wendy's Saucy Nuggs. That's probably what I'm having for lunch today, Ari. But we got 3 takes. I don't know. I think one of them you're going to find to be very bland. I think 2 of them you're going to like quite a bit. You're going to think are pretty spicy. I am curious where you think it's going to land on one of these takes, because it requires you to pick a few different teams. And I'm curious to see which teams you pick. But we'll start with this one. And I think reading your column today on 3, I think I know how you're going to feel about this. I think you're probably going to agree with me. And I don't know that it's going to be that spicy of a take. But I think there's going to be a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people listening, watching, who are going to be like, what are you talking about? No, absolutely not. And that is Colorado will get bowl eligible this week. Colorado will beat Cincinnati, which is having a very good season, and get bowl eligible this week.
Yeah, I think that's probably something I would agree with. Cincinnati is also 5-2 and 3-1 in the Big 12, and it's kind of a tough matchup. But the thing that I find interesting about Colorado, and it's true, is that for as much as we spent talking about them, and when I say we, I mean literally everyone spent talking about them in the offseason and in the first year of Dion. This little run that they're on right now has gone relatively quiet, right? Like, we're not really speaking about them as much. And I don't know why that's the case. Maybe if they would have beaten Kansas State and Travis Hunter wouldn't have gotten hurt a few weeks ago, this would be a different story. But I thought after the first 2 weeks of this season, Andy, that this was just going to be a repeat of last year, a team that, has some exciting players and talks a lot and is entertaining from like a tabloid standpoint, but not very good at football. And I have to say, in the Colorado that I went back and watched and, watched some of the games on YouTube the last few days. Like, I actually think that this team is quite good in comparison to what I thought they were going to be. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to go beat Oregon or win a national championship, but given the fact that Deion Sanders has flipped his roster with 100 players almost in the 2-year period, you know, we always say you can't build a defensive line. You can't build an offensive line that way. And yes, offensive line is their number one deficiency, but they lead the Big 12 in sacks right now. Like, they've got really good.
Yeah, they built a defensive line that way. They got some good edge rushers. BJ Green came from Arizona State. Okunlola and line.
Oh,
the other Pitt transfer. Yes, Deion Hayes. Yes,
sorry.
They did a very good. Yeah, they did a very good job.
Didn't I, bud?
Getting edge guys out of the portal, and I think again, this will be another test. Like every Big 12 game, the -3.5. It's actually a 5.5 point spread in this game. Expecting Travis Hunter to play. Now he has missed time in each of the last 2 games with a shoulder injury. I don't know if this is, you know, like they got the word out there that they expect to play. If that's for the Heisman candidacy. I think the more Travis Hunter plays, obviously, the better Colorado has a chance of winning because he's such a dominant force on both sides of the field. But, you know, this is one, if they win this one, there is a path for them into the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, here's the thing, like, and I'm seeing it in the chat too, like, who have they played? And again, this is always what people say, and I don't understand it. You guys realize that Colorado used to be the joke that people would say they haven't played anybody for. Like this, like you have to compare them to the metric of what they were, not who is the best, right? Like, I don't think that Andy and I are sitting here telling you that Colorado is a top 10 team right now. But what we are saying is that the improvement in the actual product on the field, not the hype, not the attendance, not the business sales in Boulder, the actual production of the football team on the field on Saturday, I think we could both agree is a lot further along than we anticipated, especially after week 2's 28-10 loss to Nebraska.
Yeah, they have improved dramatically over the team that we saw against Nebraska. And I think that's the key here. And remember, we had all the blazing takes after the Nebraska game. This is daddy ball. Is Deion here? And I don't know if Deion's there for the long haul or not. It sounds like he's still trying to flip Julian Lewis from USC, but then so is our guy, Coach Sig. So that's going to be quite the battle. But, you know, watching them play, they've gotten better at times at running the ball. Now, they didn't against Kansas State, and that's probably why they lost. But against Arizona, they ran the ball 39 times for 148 yards. It's not Navy or Army numbers on the ground, but for a team that couldn't run the ball at all last year, it's a big improvement.
And like Arizona was supposed to be pretty good this year. Now, obviously, that's not going as well as people in Tucson would have hoped. And, you know, I think expectations were tempered a little bit after they lost their coach and half their roster, you know, last year, Jed Fish going to Washington. But like, I'm trying to keep it like just even keel with Colorado because it's very easy to get carried away with them. And I will say, you know, and it's important to me that if I'm going to be critical and point out things that I don't think are going well at Colorado when they're not going well, I wrote the column today because I think it's important to be there as an impartial person to compliment the man when he's doing well. Now, I will tell you, and I'm sure this will get clipped, but the reason why I have been so critical of Deion, and I've said it every single time I've ever been critical of him, is that the potential for him when approaching and doing the job the way everybody else does it with his superpower is pretty limitless. And Big Cat on the show the other day said that Florida State can't be that down in the dumps because no matter what happens this year with Mike Norvell, they always have the magic bullet with Deion Sanders. And I think there's a lot of people who think that. But like, is Deion Sanders what he's done at Colorado in the turnaround? I guess all that matters is what you see on the field, but is he qualified for a job like that if he's going to remain or is disinterested in high school football recruiting? Because
I think that's the problem Florida State has now. So I don't know that specific, just because it's all his alma mater, like that specific school, I don't think qualifies. But I do think one thing we need to think about, and this is something I still think if you want to compete for national championships, you have to have a base of recruited out of high school talent. We're not talking about competing for national championships at Colorado. We're talking about competing for a Big 12 championship, which I think they can do now. Like, if they win this game, their path to the Big 12 championship is not crazy. Like, they play Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. They can win all those games. Like, it's not crazy. You can do that.
They absolutely could go to the Big 12 championship game.
But you can build what I'm saying is you can build rosters in the Big 12 this way and win the Big 12, I think. If you want to win
what
national
makes it so
championships, maybe
painful
not.
to me. Like, I understand, like, they're not playing Penn State, Oregon, Alabama, and Georgia every week, so it's a lot easier for them to get by with the deficiencies, because with those offensive line deficiencies, you just cannot play with teams that are capable of winning playoff games. And, like, I don't think there's anything that any coach can do to fix that, as we've talked about with Oklahoma all year, that isn't, some portal supplementation, but also, signing classes of 5 or 6 linemen that you can develop every year. But here's the thing, Andy, and I want you to tell me that I'm nuts, because I am nuts.
Okay.
But when he took the job at Colorado, and I'm taking you back, I've peeled back the curtain on how I felt when Lincoln Riley went to USC, right?
Yep.
And that's proven to be wrong. But when he went to Colorado, and Colorado was still in the Pac-12, a conference that, mind you, had Oregon and USC in it, it had some problems that even
in Washington,
Washington, like that was a much harder proposition than this. But I thought that Deion Sanders would use his number one qualification as a coach, and to be a coach, which is superstardom, fame, and the ability to attract talent. And I legitimately thought the man was going to be able to sign top 15 classes every year. Like, and I don't know if you think I'm nuts for thinking that.
No, I thought the same thing. I felt exactly the same way.
So now you're talking about, and this is what makes it painful for me. And like, I think people think it's hate, but it's actually disappointment, because if he were successful, because like Colorado's got a lot to sell. I mean, if you go play, like when Colorado is good and fun, like they attract an audience, they're a talking point. You can go have an amazing college football experience at Colorado, especially if he's going to have his team prepared the way that he has. So like he's passed certain tests that like a lot of people thought that he would fail. Like the ability to make a staff, like even with the Sean Lewis stuff last year, like I was like, oh boy, this is going off the rails. But the staff that he's put together at Colorado this year has been very good. And I think that we can say that they're a pretty well-coached team, right? Those were the tests that everybody thought he was going to fail. I never worried about, like I thought that those were the tests that he might fail. The thing that I literally never worried about was his ability to attract talent. And that's the thing that's deficient right now. So if you were to, and that sounds crazy to say because they have two of the best players in college football, and Travis Hunter and his son, Shedeur Sanders. And Colorado's level of athlete is certainly higher than it was before he started. But could you imagine if he matched his portal ability to get the flashy skill position players that he's gotten with top 15 classes in the Big 12 for 4 straight years, how good this freaking team would be? Like at a certain point, and I'm sure that Deion Sanders himself would appreciate this. Like, do you want to be held to the standard of the Colorado from 2020, or do you want to be held to the Coach Prime standard? Because the Coach Prime standard, this is pretty good, but I don't know that this is like right off into the sunset saying, I told you so good. So like, I think that like on one hand, I want to be like, awesome job. There's no question that Colorado is a completely different place now than it was when he got there. There's no question that that's something to celebrate and to applaud and to acknowledge, right? But on the other hand, I do know in my gut that if Deion Sanders woke up with the fire that Kirby Smart does when it comes to high school football recruiting, he legitimately could build a program at Colorado, and I still believe this, that could win the Big 12 for like 5 years in a row. And like maybe win playoff games. Like I think that is in the cards.
They could easily have the most talented roster. Now, and you look at Jordan Seaton this year, who was the number one offensive line recruit, who did go to Colorado, and he's gotten better and better every game. So it is very interesting. We're going to keep an eye on this one.
7 Jordan Seatons on the team.
I got you.
And there could be. I really legitimately think there could be. If he went to high schools and he recruited his ass off, like Deion Sanders is a very charismatic, handsome, charming, really is somebody that could sell anything. Like I would believe, like And now that he has some proof of concept, right? Like that, to me, go sign a top 10 class now and let's roll. Like that's, but like maybe that's just never going to happen. Maybe that's not what's in the cards for him. But for him to be qualified to take over at a Florida State or a program on that level with the expectations that they have, I don't know that you can do that by flipping 100 players in 2 years. But again, he's proven me wrong already, so maybe he'll do it again.
We shall see. But that's going to be a fun game. I'm telling you right now, because Cincinnati's been good. Everybody was down on Scott Satterfield before this season. Well, guess what? They've had a good year already. Brennan Sorsby has been a surprise, the transfer from Indiana. That's going to be a fun game because it's one of Colorado's toughest games left. And if they can win it, again, the path to the Big 12 title remains open. But they will be bowl eligible, which is something that I think a lot of people didn't
and I
think
have to say this.
Deion was going to be able to do.
Your take is naked because Colorado is like a 6-point favorite in this game. So like
I know.
So
okay.
they're probably
right,
going to win. Yeah.
Let's move. We're going to move to the next take, but first I want to tell you about JLAB. Great headphones. They've got the Lux over the ear ones. They've got the JLAB Sport that go around the ear, so you can wear them when you're working out. They're gearing up for college football. Some of the top talent in the game, from Travis Hunter to Will Howard to Quinshon Judkins. These football stars embody JLAB's core values of innovation, performance, and excellence. Just as JLAB pushes the boundaries of audio and tech, these athletes redefine their sport with skill and dedication. Whether you're traveling to watch your favorite team or streaming the game on your mobile device, JLAB has you covered. So find the blue box at retailers near you or visit JLAB.com. Your kind of tech. All right. Next, Saucy take. I don't know how saucy you're going to think this one is, but Auburn is going to win its first SEC game this week. Auburn will go to Kentucky and get its first SEC win. The Tigers are a 2.5-point dog at the Wildcats. I'm going to play you a clip from Mark Stoops. And it's so interesting because it's one that some Kentucky fans have kind of latched onto, and it's bothered them. And it's really kind of out of context. It's actually more about Auburn, what he's talking about on his coach's show from Monday.
There's other teams that are in very similar situations than us that are very good football teams. Again, we're about to play one. Yeah. That people, if you just want to look at the win-loss column, you really don't know football. And watch the games. And I saw that with Florida. We saw it with Florida. Florida, Tennessee.
So that's Mark Stoops talking about how Auburn has been right there. Like, you and I thought Auburn was going to beat Missouri, and it looked for 3.5 quarters like they would. They should have beaten Oklahoma. They think they should have beaten Arkansas. I thought Arkansas handled them in that game. But this is a team that is on the precipice of something disastrous if they do not get some conference wins. This week against Kentucky, next week against Vanderbilt, their best shot. Because after that, it's A&M and Alabama. But, Ari, do you think this is the week that Auburn finally breaks through?
You know what would be even saucier take? Because I think that Auburn's going to get an SEC win in the next month. But, like, what if it's, like, one of the next two, or not the
what if it's A&M or Bama?
Yeah, like I think I might get on board with that.
I think if they lose these next two, it's Katie bar the door. If they lose these next two, it's awful. And look, ULM, which is between Vandy and Texas A&M, everyone's like, oh, it's ULM. ULM is good this year. ULM's 5-1 right now. Like, Bryant Vincent is doing an incredible job at ULM. Remember, Bryant Vincent was the interim coach at UAB a few years ago when Bill Clark stepped down. Mm-hmm. He was the New Mexico OC last year. So he brought one of his quarterbacks, Aiden Armenta, from New Mexico. They're good too. So, like, if I'm Auburn, I'm sitting here going, we gotta win. We gotta win now. Because
I think that this probably feels like the most likely win, right? Like, so, and they're a 2.5 point
yeah, because Vandy actually seems harder than this one.
Right.
Because Kentucky, I don't know about you, Ari. You tell me. Kentucky feels like they were in this mode of they'll play great, then they'll play poorly, then they'll play great, then they'll play poorly. the loss to Vanderbilt and then followed up by the loss to Florida, like they just look bad against Florida. They looked unprepared. Like DJ Lagway hit 5 throws of 40 yards or more on them last week. They have a freshman quarterback making his first SEC start and and he averaged 18.5 yards per attempt. It was one of the weirdest stat lines you've ever seen. 7 of 14 for 259 yards. Like, it's crazy. So, if you're going to sit there and our guy Clark Brooks, the SEC stat cat, broke down why it happened. But if you're going to sit there in a cover 3 shell and let a freshman tear you apart, like, I'm not sure how creative you're going to be. But Auburn is in a situation, Ari, where last week we saw them doing the thing that we said they need to do. Just run the ball. They tried that. It did not get them enough first downs to win the game. But they did not have the crippling interception. So can they combine the good things from last week with the lack of crippling interception and then just make a couple more plays and win a damn game?
Well, Andy, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I watch Auburn play, and when I watch Auburn play, I don't get this overwhelming feeling of like, yeah, this team's dog shit. Like, I don't like, that's not how I feel when I watch.
Never.
So, like, there are certain times where you just like watch a team and it's just like, oh my God, this is terrible football. Like, and it's like Auburn makes 5 plays a game, maybe, or 4 plays a game that make you feel that way. But like overall, the product is not that far off from winning football than you think. Now, obviously, if you have a quarterback or quarterbacks that are prone to crippling turnovers, that's a very hard thing because you say clean up the turnovers, but you can't clean up the quarterback. So like that to me is a nice step in the right direction last week. So like if you want me to get on board with a 2.5 point underdog, winning against a team that's also struggling quite a bit, like I think I could do that with you.
Now, we're probably going to, if Auburn does win this game, we're probably going to have other conversations next week about Mark Stoops in Kentucky because they're going to be just pitchforks and torches, and there's nothing you can do about it because Kentucky would owe him $1 billion. So,
which is, I mean, it's like funny to think how many teams in the SEC right now are actually just kind of like in this like weird, like once they lose, like we're going live, we got to talk about what this means. Like there's a lot of this happening in the conference right now. So, but yes, I agree.
All right. So I don't know if that was that spicy, but I think you might think this next one is. But before we do that one, I want to talk to you about Rhoback. I am, of course, wearing my Rhoback performance hoodie. Well, one of my many Rhoback performance hoodies because I own many because they get stolen, because they are the most comfortable piece of clothing in my wardrobe, and my daughter has raided my closet, raided it. My wife has taken them. My son is not my size yet, but the second he becomes my size, he's going to start stealing them too. So I recommend when you go to rhoback.com, that's RHOBACK.com, and you use the code Andy for 20% off your first order, get more than one because somebody's going to steal it. But also, don't just stop at the performance hoodie. You've got the polos, the Q-zips, the new joggers. The fabric on the new joggers is just buttery soft. It is so comfortable. It feels like your legs are being massaged the entire time. I don't know how they do it, but Rhoback keeps getting better. So go to RHOBACK.com. Use the code Andy for 20% off your first order. All right. Last saucy take, and I think this will be the sauciest. But I want your input on exactly who we're talking about here. At least 2 undefeated teams are going down this week.
Okay.
And notice I said week
talking.
and not weekend.
Yeah, we're talking. The first 2 were like Nuggs dipped into sauce. Now we're gonna get covered a little bit here, right?
We're pouring the ghost pepper sauce on right now.
Okay, so I think BYU is 1. And it's not because I don't think that BYU is good. I think that the line is fishy as hell. And now I think that UCF is a 2-point favorite. So if you're going to give me a layup, like I'll take one of the teams that's undefeated. That's an underdog. And the second one is really difficult because I'm trying to figure out who's actually playing in a losable game this weekend. Miami's playing Florida State, so that's probably not going to go well, right? Or I mean, not going to, be in that situation. Like
probably not. So obviously the ones that would like we're going live immediately after it happens, if it happens, are Florida State, Miami, and Illinois, Oregon. Those are the ones that we were boom, it is going to be an absolute wild day. And we haven't had a result like that, have we? I mean, Vandy, Alabama. Vandy, Alabama was that this season. So we've had that with that level of point spread. But that was a road game. These are home games. That's the harder part with those.
Well, did you find one that jumped out to you that I'm missing here?
Well, I'll tell you which two I think it'll be. Because I think your BYU UCF one is a possibility as well. That's why I said at least two, because it could be more. But I think Pitt is going to lose to Syracuse. In fact, I picked that game when we picked it on Monday. I picked Syracuse to win that game. I think Navy's going to lose to Notre Dame. As excited as I am to see Navy against Notre Dame, and even though I picked Navy against the spread because I do think they're going to be able to keep it close, I think Notre Dame is probably going to beat Navy. And so that'll be another one.
Yeah. I actually forgot about Navy. So now that you mention it, like I think the Syracuse Pitt game is just going to be a banger. I can't wait to watch it. You have multiple spots here with undefeated teams where a loss wouldn't be like an earthquake. So I think that you have a pathway. Like if you came into a weekend and all the undefeated teams were 12-point favorites or better, I'd be like, okay, I don't know about this. But you have one that's an underdog, and you've got two teams like Navy could be winning this game in the second half. Like I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. So they also could be losing 40-0 depending on how things go. I think the two that I feel the best about, Andy, would be BYU losing to UCF and also Pitt losing to Cuse, because I think Cuse is actually pretty good, and they're playing a team that's 5-1. So
let me throw one more at you where the underdog, the undefeated team is favored, but the underdog is less than a touchdown spread. Penn State at Wisconsin. This is the undefeated team on the road. This is the one where we've got that team on the road. And so I don't know. I don't think Wisconsin can beat Penn State, but I'm not sure Penn State is that athletically superior to Wisconsin to be able to just pound on them. And in fact, what I'd like to see from Penn State is them go to a place like Wisconsin and win a game by 4 touchdowns. But we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, go win the game in a way that makes you feel like Ohio State better be, watching its back the following weekend. Like, do something that makes me actually believe that Penn State could win the Ohio State game. Because at this point in my analysis this season, I don't see that happening. So I don't think that Penn State's going to lose this game. I think they might win by 7. They might win by 10. I don't know that they're going to win by 28, but I do not think they're going to lose. I like the other options better. What about Liberty against Kennesaw State on Wednesday night? You're going to throw some love over there to the Flames, or what? They're 26-point favorites. You want to really
I'd be throwing some love to the Owls to Kennesaw State to win that one. Liberty has not been as dominant as it was last year, but I think they're probably okay here.
Yeah, they probably are okay here.
By the way,
terrible against the spread.
Incredible weekday football. We got to see JP Pickles play last night.
Yeah.
If you guys weren't watching the UTEP La Tech game, our guy JP Pickles, the freshman quarterback for UTEP from Tallahassee, Florida, whose name is JP Pickles, for God's sake. JP Pickles got in the game. Now, they didn't let him throw very much. They did not win. He was not supposed to be in the game. It was their starting quarterback is out for the season. Their backup got just demolished on a pretty dirty targeting hit. And JP Pickles had to come to the game. Clearly that was not the plan. They did not do a lot of throwing with him, but I think that they're probably dealing with JP Pickles going forward here. So we'll see if he gets to diversify his offerings as they go forward. But La Tech did wind up winning that game.
We work with a man named JD Pickell, and I think it's too similar for my liking.
Well, I need JD Pickell to have JP Pickles on his show. Like, JD Pickell's got Dylan Gabriel on his show this week, which is it's a nice get. Like, it's Oregon's quarterback. He might win the Heisman Trophy, blah, blah, blah. But when you are named JD Pickell and you can get a starting quarterback, who he's probably a starting quarterback as of this week, name JP Pickles on your show, by God, you get JP Pickles on your show.
I gotta say, I love El Paso. I love the town. I feel like I don't know if you ever get these like romantic feelings of like, oh, I could live somewhere and be happy. Like, I feel like I could live in El Paso and be happy.
With your Mexican food takes, good God,
I know. No, I know. But
could.
like, I like the area of the country. I like how it's in the Southwest.
Ari, I'm going to go Pitt, Navy, maybe BYU as our undefeated teams going down. Who you got?
I think I'm going to go with BYU going down, and Pitt would be my two most likely ones. But I think this is clearly the spiciest take of the three.
Well, and what you just said, because you didn't say Navy. If Navy beats Notre Dame, that's a result that will kind of shake.
I mean, I think
if
Navy beats Notre Dame, that's like we're going live for this.
We are definitely going live if Navy beats Notre Dame.
It's like, and you want to know what's crazy about it, Andy? Is that I don't know if the takeaway from that result would be Notre Dame stinks. I think it would be Navy is for real. Like that's a little bit different, right? Like
100%.
You know, a lot of times when we go live, it's like, holy crap, a team just lost a game we never thought in a million years they could lose. And it's like, sometimes when that team loses the game,
and I will say, I doubt very seriously Notre Dame is going into this game not taking. I think Notre Dame is probably taking Navy very seriously in this game. So
sure,
yeah, because if you watch, when you turn on that tape of Navy's offense, it's scary looking. So now, as one of the commenters pointed out in the chat earlier, they have not played a defense anywhere near Notre Dame's level, anywhere near the level of athletes on defense that they're going to see this week. So it will be the biggest challenge they've had so far. But I'm very excited. And like I said, at least two undefeated teams going down this week. All right, Ari. One more thing before we get to Doug Lesmerises and the sauciest of saucy takes, his take that the SEC stinks. We will talk about Ashton Jeanty, because Ashton Jeanty, who it's interesting because like if you look at On Three, where we have, who we like for the Heisman Trophy, we all like Ashton Jeanty right now. But he's not the betting favorite for the Heisman. But he's been the most dominant player in college football. Travis Hunter's been hurt. I think that has taken away from his candidacy somewhat. But Ashton Jeanty has been incredible. We have not seen him play since the Hawaii game, and now we get to see him Friday night at UNLV in a game that could help decide the Mountain West race, or could be the first of two between these two teams. Ari, let us look at it through the lens of our friends at PrizePicks. And if you're not playing PrizePicks already, what are you doing? Download the app, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly to play. And one of the squares you might want to play is an Ashton Jeanty square. And so let's look at what Ashton Jeanty is expected to do this week. So Ashton Jeanty's rushing number for the UNLV game is 193.5. You can decide if you think he's going to go for less than that or more than that. 193.5, Ari. Like, that's almost 200 yards for one human being. And they set this level as this is the kind of average expected number of yards for him. It's almost 200 yards.
I mean, I just feel like, and I don't want to sound like a hater, but like you just have to go auto less than, because it's just such a high number. Like, I don't know, like it's like a situation where it's like, even if he rushes for 185 yards, like that's a monster,
which is an incredible game.
Like, I'm not saying he's not going to have a good game. I don't know. Like, I guess maybe it's time to start questioning. Like, do you think he's going to break Barry Sanders' record this year?
I think there's a good chance. And what's amazing to me is that the carries are going to be so because people are going to say, well, they only played 11 regular season games back then. Postseason games stats didn't count. Okay. But Barry Sanders carried 360 times that season. Ashton Jeanty's on pace for about 265. And he still may gain 2,600 something yards.
They got to change that.
It's crazy.
We got to keep him in the game. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a coach, you got to protect your most valuable asset. But, I would run him into the ground and to get him that record. And, I don't know. Like, you also have to protect your body if you're a running back, because in the NFL, they care about tread. It's been incredible.
Perhaps he's a cyborg like the last running back who won the Heisman Trophy. Derrick Henry, last seen going for 81 yards on one carry in a Monday Night Football game the other night. So at 30 years old. So it's not, if you're a complete freak, which Ashton Jeanty may be a complete freak, because the thing about Ashton Jeanty that I love is that he's not doing this behind a bulldozing offensive line of like 5 NFL first round picks. He's doing this where he's getting hit and he's just breaking every tackle.
Wise Words here in the chat says Ashton Jeanty is good, but not the best back. I'd be very curious to know who you would.
Who's better?
I don't even know where to begin with that. I don't know.
That is,
I don't even who's even
one of the most incredible statements. That's like if we did an NFL show and someone's like, Patrick Mahomes is good, but he's not the best quarterback in the league. Like, who then?
Dylan Sampson and Amari Hampton.
Well, listen, we love Dylan Sampson. We are a Dylan Sampson podcast. He taught us how to dance. But I think even Dylan Sampson looks at Ashton Jeanty's numbers and goes, damn.
Wise Words might have brought the spiciest take of the show. I mean, I don't know. We haven't gotten to Doug yet, but no, I cannot wait. And also, if he goes more than that number on Friday night in a game that starts at like 10 p.m. my time, that I'm going to be staying up to watch, and they beat UNLV, like it just keeps getting more and more impressive. So he is a freak of nature in the best possible way, and I'm excited to watch him cook on Friday night.
Yeah. And what do you think on the prize picks? Because you'd also go with the Goblin square of 1.5 rushing. I love it. The Goblin square is supposed to be the easy one to get. The Demon square is the hard one. His Demon square for touchdowns is 2.5. His Goblin square, the easy one, is 1.5, which it's an automatic more, which means you think he's going to score at least 2. So that's the easy one. 2 touchdowns, which, by the way, he's done in 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to get there. But I think UNLV is going to give him a game, guys. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, UNLV's defense is probably the best he's played since Oregon's, but he shredded Oregon's defense too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh boy, this is going to be so much fun. But yes, download the PrizePicks app, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly. Ari, I hope the people have braced themselves.
Turn your volume
because
down.
they're about to witness a force of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Lesmerises.
There is nothing scary happening down there. And what's happening at Oregon, and what's happening at Ohio State, and what's happening at Penn State, and what's happening at Iowa State, and what's happening at Kansas State, and what's happening at Pitt, and what's happening at Indiana, and all over the North, you should be scared of us. So we're ready for it. We welcome it. And let's frickin' go, Curb. Let's go. Are you scared? Who's scared? If you're in the chat, tell us if you're scared or tell us if you're not scared of the South anymore, because the worm has turned. So the world better get used to it, because this is the new reality. And if you are out there when you're trying to make fun of a crappy Southern game like Alabama, Tennessee, you're making jokes about, like it feels like a Big Ten game, get out. The SEC stinks on its own, and the North is ready. So this is the new world. So you know what, Kirby? You're lucky because you get to hang out in the South right now. But we'll see you in December, brother. And nobody's scared.
That voice you hear is Doug Lesmerises, and if I am Ari's stepdad and Bob Wasserman is Ari's birth father, Doug is Ari's daddy. He's got his sword. He's one of the kings of the North. He's ready for all of you. You are that, Doug. After we played that clip, because you said the SEC stinks about 50 times on your game recap show on Saturday night. You are now the gif of that one guy standing with the sword as the horde approaches from the other side.
Yeah. No, I want that. We just don't want to get sued by Game of Thrones. But other than that, yeah, I'm Jon Snow. Like, bring it. Yeah, because
hold on.
Gotta do it.
Someone's got to do it.
Ari doesn't know anything about Game of Thrones.
Oh.
But I assume you do.
I know the theme. I get the theme.
The king in the north was Rob Stark. You remember what happened to him?
Yeah.
Don't go to any weddings, Doug.
No, I would give it up for the North. I would give my life for the North. I'm okay. We're good. Hold on a second. All right, let's do it. Whatever
Beautiful.
it takes.
Beautiful. So you think the SEC stinks. Tell us why the SEC stinks, Doug.
Because they're propped up and puffed up, and they were.
Wait,
They were
hold on.
propped up
Let me check. Are they propped up by all the NFL GMs that keep picking more of their players than every other league?
Are we playing like name that NFL draft pick? Or are we talking about football on the field?
Oh, we're talking about the aggregate where the people who get paid to pick players or they get fired if they pick the wrong ones pick more SEC players than everybody else. But go ahead.
We haven't had a draft yet this year, and if you want to live in the past,
But we've had one in the last 20 years, and they've all had more SEC players than every other league.
So if live in the past, that's fine. That's your answer, because you immediately went to the past. Because you know where you didn't go. You didn't go on the field this year. And Greg Sankey wants 5 or 6 playoff teams.
I am all ready for Tennessee to go into the cauldron of Bloomington, Indiana. I am ready to see that in December.
Tennessee that outscored opponents 191-13 in its first 3 games, and since then beat an Oklahoma team that benched its quarterback by 10, lost to Arkansas, was taken to overtime by a Florida team desperate to fire its coach and being saved by a freshman quarterback, and beat Alabama by 7 in a game when neither quarterback could hit wide open receivers. Like if we're pretending, and tell me why Tennessee is ranked ahead of Iowa State, BYU, or Indiana right now.
Because everybody thinks Tennessee would beat those teams if they played. That's why.
But that's not based on reality, Andy. So we're just going to play. Why don't we just have recruiting rankings at the beginning of the year,
Doug,
not play the games and jump straight
Doug,
to the playoff?
there's a playoff at the end. Like,
yeah,
Indiana is going to probably host a game as an 11-1 team.
I know.
And it's probably going to be an SEC team.
Yeah,
and
we're ready. Let's go.
What happens if the SEC teams come up north into the cold and do what they usually do when they play northern teams in the playoffs?
Let's live in the past. Are you only going to live in the past, or are you going to acknowledge what's happening on the field? Tell me who's the third best team in the SEC right now? For real.
The third best team in the SEC is either LSU or Texas A&M.
LSU with the loss to 4-loss USC, who's lost to every Midwestern Big Ten team they've played all year. Or who was the other option? Tennessee.
Texas A&M, which lost to Notre Dame.
Who lost to Notre Dame, who lost to Northern Illinois. Like, what game are we playing? How long do you want to play the game, Andy? Tennessee's adjusted EPA.
Doug, you're living in the past. You're living in the past, Doug.
See,
let's move on to the future. Let's talk about when they play at the end.
No, now see, you don't want to live in the present. You don't want to live in right now what has happened on the field this year. And you laugh because you know you're wrong. And it's changed, Andy, to pretend. What am I going to do? Argue about the SEC winning 17 or whatever it is, 18 of the last 20 titles? I get it. But in an NIL world, in a portal world, when the greatest college football coach of all time is no longer propping up your conference, let's live in today.
But see, Doug, you don't just dislike the conference, though. You dislike the region. So I got to ask you this: like,
I do.
Does the ACC put you in a blender? Like, is Pitt legit, but no, we have Clemson and Miami not?
I've got no blender, Andy. I've got a path and a plan and a latitude. We've got 28 Northern teams. We don't worry about conferences. We worry about North and South. We have 28 Power 4 Northern teams that we analyze, discuss, contextualize, and talk about on Kings of the North. That includes Syracuse, Pitt, and Boston College. Just get a map, Andy. It's not that hard, actually. It's just a map. So,
Doug, I went to an SEC school. I don't know how to read a map.
That's you said it, not me. It's just north-south. We understand north-south. The ACC doesn't make any sense. The Big 12 doesn't. No conferences make sense to you.
So we going based on the Mason-Dixon line? Is that what we're doing here?
It's like 38.5 degrees. That's the latitude we found. And there's a guideline, man. Like, we've taken Manhattan, Kansas, and we took both Kansas schools, but we don't take Virginia Tech or Louisville. So
I have to say something on this podcast today.
It's around there.
No, you don't.
Your guy came in hot. Your guy came in hot on me.
I know. You didn't even let him.
I love it. I love the whole premise because there are so many like SEC centric podcasts and obviously Feinbaum. So this is a beautiful premise where you take these people who live in places where it's cold and they never see the sun, and the women aren't as pretty, and make them feel better about their choices. It's amazing.
I spent a large portion of my life in the North. Okay, there are very, very pretty women up there.
Triggered, Ari.
Oh, and you married one that grew up in Las Vegas and went to Texas A&M, Ari.
Wow.
So how'd that work out for you?
I'm both.
So on tilt, Andy.
Doug,
nobody's ever done this before. Nobody's ever done this to the South.
I know, it's
genius.
Don't know what to
do.
It's brilliant. I wish I'd thought of it. That's the problem.
Doug, I've been wanting to ask you this because you and I have a very long history together. But the program that we covered together for a decade is a program in the North that's most built like the teams in the South traditionally, right? Absolutely. So you're keenly aware of what it looks like, because even though I did cover Ohio State for as many years, Ohio State taught me how to understand the South, because that's the most Southern team that there is in the North. So when you go through the Northern teams and you look at the teams that you think, like the Iowa States and the Pitts of the world that are undefeated and doing really well right now, at the bottom of your heart that they aren't built the same way as the teams that like Ohio State is built like. And that might be different now because of the NIL era and the transfer portal. But when you look at the teams in the North, how many of them do you actually think will compete at a high level in December? And how much has your brain had to change based on the way that we come to understand how Ohio State got to where it did under Urban Meyer?
So obviously, the world has changed. A couple of years ago, Eli Holstein wouldn't be the quarterback at Pitt, right?
He'd be stuck at Alabama, yeah.
He'd be stuck at Alabama. And a couple of years ago, when a coach like Curt Cignetti came from JMU to Indiana, he wouldn't have been able to bring 12 guys with him, right? So that's part of the whole point of what is happening. So the bottom line is, and this is where we all agree, right? Who in the North operates in the same way as the top tier SEC teams? Ohio State and Oregon. And that's it. Like Penn State doesn't, Notre Dame doesn't, Michigan doesn't. But I think the point is that there are more ways to win now. And so if you have great coaching, or you develop, or you keep guys in NIL, or you add a quarterback like Curtis Rourke in the transfer portal, or Eli Holstein in the transfer portal, like those things, a reality where in the past, probably a home state Kansas guy like Avery Johnson maybe wouldn't have picked Kansas State. In this world, he does pick Kansas State, like those kind of things. I think that there are a lot of things in the way the sport has changed. And everybody's saying that has flattened out the sport, but I do think has benefited the North, because if all it was before is who's closer to more talent, that's Southern teams, and who's maybe doing things on the side a little bit more, that's Southern teams, and the rules changed, and now the North is even. I think the North is even with the South in this world.
Well, one thing we definitely agree on, you and your co-host Bill Landis were talking about Indiana, and I thought it's funny because we've been getting this all week. Like Indiana doing that to Nebraska, people tell us means Nebraska stinks. No, Nebraska was good going into that game. Nebraska's defense had been really good the whole season, and Indiana embarrassed them. Like Indiana is flat out good, and I think people have a hard time accepting that. And it's a lot of it probably is what you're talking about. Like the new world is so different. There wasn't that capability to go and get like what Curt Cignetti did. Obviously, there's a core of guys he brought from James Madison. So they know what he wants. They've also won a bunch of games together. But they also went out and got a bunch of guys like Curtis Rourke who started a bunch of games and won a bunch of games elsewhere. So like those guys are not going to be scared of some 5-star from Nebraska because he has an N on his helmet. Like, it's not going to bother them. Like a freshman, it might bother, but these dudes that have played all these games, they don't care.
Yeah, I mean, it's excellent coaching. It is all that transfer portal stuff. But I will say, to your initial point there, Andy, the North has to stop thinking that way, because I feel like when there's a big game in the North, whoever loses, the instinct is to say the loser stinks of a big Northern game. And the instinct in the South, especially when there's an upset, is to say that the winning team was great and the losing team is great too. So when Kentucky beats Ole Miss, does everybody say Ole Miss stinks, or is it? I
think a lot of people are saying that. I think a lot of people are saying that now, especially the more we watch Kentucky.
Because Kentucky stinks. But for 3 weeks, everybody thought Kentucky was great until they lost to Florida and Vanderbilt. And by the way, Vanderbilt was tied with Ball State at 14 going into the fourth quarter. So the South thinks everybody like that, but in the North, like that's our instinct.
But see, that's not true.
We do it to ourselves.
When a Southern team loses, they both stink because the team that beat them stinks, and now they stink because the team that beat them. Have you never watched Feinbaum? Like, they ain't playing nobody, Paul.
Tennessee's 8th in the polls, Andy. Why is Tennessee ranked ahead of Iowa State, Indiana, and BYU? BYU has 2 top 25 wins.
Because people think that Tennessee would win if they played. But the committee may not feel that way. The committee is the one that's what's going to be interesting to see. Matter. Will it when we get that first committee ranking?
It's 2 weeks, right?
Will the polls? Yeah, it's election night. Will the polls adjust?
God,
and I'm curious about that.
Smart, aren't they? Aren't they just
the
real world and just do their thing?
I am super fascinated because, as you know, and I came on your show last year, Doug, and I've been having kind of an existential crisis because I've always been, if you recruit the best, you are the best, right? So, like, I will admit that when I picture an Indiana versus LSU matchup, like in my head, which could happen one day, or a team like it from the South playing Indiana.
Could happen this year.
My gut reaction is to assume that Indiana will lose the game. And like that isn't right this year. So I do think that it's not
right from now on.
And like that
might world.
Because of the recruiting stuff. So like the thing that I think will be really fascinating is when these teams play. Like, I think it's a very important year. Like, if you are worried about narrative and what people think and how people react to losses and how people are ranked, which I think makes sense, like, this year is a very important year for the North, is it not?
Of course. I mean, so we're just talking now, right? Because we've never had this before. We've never had the matchups that matter. And especially once guys, I used to track all the bowls, right? I used to think the bowls really mattered. SEC and Big Ten would play a lot in bowl season. And I would think that the Capital One Bowl was a referendum on conference superiority. And then guys started opting out, and that clearly it wasn't that way anymore. So we've lost that. We haven't had that. So this is it. And again, the matchups this year, it's like Bama, Wisconsin. Okay, well, that's not equal North versus South. Bama blew them out. Texas, Michigan, that wasn't equal North versus South. Texas didn't play Oregon.
Where does Wisconsin rank in the Big Ten right now? Because I'm with you on that. But yeah, because they've won their last 3 by 20 or more, but it feels like that's a function of the schedule more than anything else.
So, but I mean, like nobody, again, which is why I think this stuff they're talking about, SEC Big Ten Challenge, I played that on my Sega Genesis in 2007. I played like that would be. Can we do that in the regular season every year in September?
It'd be so great. And what I want is them to do it where they say you have a home game, you have an away game, and then they match it up year by year, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2.
There's no reason they can't do that. It would
the thing too is that
light up September. Be awesome.
In the past too, I think there was a thought process, and maybe still to a certain extent now, that the 8th best team in the SEC, because that was usually a team that had top 25 talent nationally, was much better than the 8th best team in the Big Ten. And now, maybe because of the expansion and some of the teams that have joined it and it pushes down.
I kind of like Alabama against Iowa, Ari.
But that's what it is.
Good about that one.
Matchup. That's the matchup right now, right? Like if Alabama's 7 or 8 right now in the Big. Well, I don't know if they're that low, Andy.
So now
I don't know if they're that low either.
The modern SEC dynasty has collapsed inward on itself, and now you're puffing your chest out because they beat Iowa. Congratulations to the SEC.
Well,
great job.
Tennessee
everybody.
just beat Iowa too. When they played, it was 35-3, I think. So, but it was a bowl game, opt-outs, Wait, they didn't have any opt-outs, but
past. I'll count the references that Andy has to the past. I do. So. But the whole point is that we have to shift our thinking. And I have not heard anyone on this show, me included, yet bring up the fact that 2 Northern teams played for the national title last year. That's the past.
They
Why
did.
You mentioned that, Andy.
Did. And Michigan was built in a way that I think is going to be the model now.
Great model.
Where you are going to have this baseline of talent you got out of high school. You're going to develop your linemen. And then when you need something, you're going to go get it. So for Michigan last year, it was Josiah Stewart. It was Drake Nugent. It was Ladarius Henderson. Like they needed those spots filled, and they filled them. And I think that is the more sustainable team building model going forward, which some of these SEC schools are going to have to get on board with and figure out.
But the whole point is there's more than one model. Because in the past, in the previous 15 years in the modern era of college football, right? BCS on or whatever, the Saban era, there was one model, which is recruit the butt off.
Right. And there were only 4 or 5 teams at a given time that could do anything. So, and
obviously the SEC had an edge there. Of course they did. Of course they did.
But I mean, Clemson did it too. Ohio State did it too. But that's it. I mean, it really, it was very limited. No, this is so much better. And that's what people are like, oh, Oregon's just buying all these recruits. I don't care how they're going to Oregon. I care that Oregon can win. And that makes it interesting.
And I don't care. I used to care. Do you guys think, I'll just say it. Do you guys think previous to NIL, do you think the SEC and the South cheated more than the Big Ten and the North?
I think they cheated better.
Under the table.
I think they cheated better. Like Ohio State was really bad at it. They kept getting caught.
Yeah.
Like,
okay,
that just means you're not good at it.
Would say that's like you take pride in cheating. That's like a very Southern thing to say. Like we cheated better.
Wait, did you think there was a more? Do you think it was morally wrong to pay people for being good at football?
It was against the rules. I wouldn't say it was morally
wrong.
The
rules were also against the rules were also against the law. So I just think it was civil disobedience. Personally,
so you are like you should run for office down there in the South. They would eat you up, brother. So the whole point is, though,
Doug, you know your base, and I know my base.
Is your base seriously the South? You're a national show. Is your base the South? Because that's the whole point too. If you're a national show where your base is the South and not the nation, that's why we have to exist.
I got this Yankee right here that works with me. He became a Yankee in Columbus. You lived there for 10 years and became a Yankee.
South. Okay.
Well,
I think that's the whole thing. The North has never tried to claim a culture or a community, I think, at least to the same degree of the South. We know what Southern college football is. I don't know that you can define
because you had pro teams. That's why. Like, if you live in Detroit
here too. We love
you do. Exactly. Yeah. Like the Midwest loves college football just as much as the South. The difference is the Midwest always had pro teams. But like if you grew up in Alabama, you didn't have a pro team. Like,
no, I know, but let's rally around college. College football is the second most popular sport in the country. There's room for you to like your NFL team and still love your college football team. But what happened is that the rules. So what was happening in the past, Andy? Whether you want to call it cheating more or cheating better, I think people would probably agree that the SEC / the South was doing it better or more than the North. And the North
invented it, of course.
Was trying to follow the rules were there, and half the country and half the sport ignored them, and half maybe sort of tried to follow them. So what NIL does is says, okay, it's all above board. And now that we've got it above board, guess what? The North can compete. Now that it's not competing.
We don't actually know that yet, though. We kind of need to see it in the playoff. Right now. I mean, we did see it last year. We saw it last year.
No, I understand. So you will continue to hold on to what happened in 2011.
No,
but you will ignore what's happened in the first 7 weeks of the season.
What I'm saying is when they play each other, when the good teams from each league play each other at the end of the year, we're going to get a body of work and actually a larger sample size because there's more games, not just this year, but like next year, over the next 5 years.
That's going to be awesome.
Actually have an answer. Right. I agree.
We will.
I agree. But
I would say, based on the fact that 2 Northern teams played for a national championship last year, and that right now there are 10 undefeated teams, and 8 are in the North and 2 are in the South, I would say the recent body of work in the modern era using the rules that are currently used, I would say the North's doing pretty good. I would say it's flattened out.
It is doing great.
Yeah,
and I am glad it's flattened out because I am glad there are more than 4 teams with a chance. Like,
absolutely.
I think teams having a chance to compete for national titles makes the whole sport better, makes everybody more engaged, more interested, and it makes it more of a national proposition because, like you said, everything was sort of geared toward these certain places. This is one thing we have trouble with as a national show, and I'm curious because you're you're still not national and proudly not national.
Cut
But
off the bottom of the country.
you're also not one school focused, which is
Right.
kind of the business model here, or one conference focused,
Oh.
which is also kind of the business model. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, because I think the bigger tent is helpful, because think about 5 years ago, you guys talking about Pitt and Kansas State. Like,
Mm-hmm. It's a
by
different world.
November, it's like, okay, whether they're out.
We had the idea for the show, and the North rose to the challenge. Like, it is very fortuitous timing for us and coincidental timing. But I did think, as these things were happening, I did think the North had a better chance. But part of it originally was like, hey, listen, okay, Clemson and Georgia and Alabama, and they're all better than the North. But like, we know that. Can't we still talk about the ways the North is good? It was much more, the original idea of the show was much more like, not excuse making exactly, but acknowledging Southern superiority and then wanting to talk about Northern college football anyway. And then this happened. And then Washington and Michigan played for the national championship. And now we have all these teams who are there are literally like 12 programs in the North that are having their best season in X amount of years. So I mean, it's lucky for us, but I do think it's worth talking about, because part of the point, Andy, too, is just like, we get it. But if you're a fan of the upper half of the Big 12 or the Big 10, and it's like you tune into a national show and it's Alabama and it's Georgia and it's Texas, I get it. I understand why that's the conversation, but I thought maybe you'd want something else. And then it turns out there's really good football up here this year, and I think it will continue.
I do too, especially like Dan Lanning's not leaving Oregon. Everybody's tried to come after him, and
I'm on the
he ain't going
clock for Kalen DeBoer. I think Kalen DeBoer is a bad fit. I might be on the 3-year plan with that. So let's.
I don't know. I don't know about Kalen DeBoer. I do know, like, part of me thinks Nick Saban saw this coming. That this is part of the reason why he ditched when he did.
Is the talent that down? Is the talent that bad? Or are you talking about the flattening of the sport?
The talent, the flattening part, because Nick Saban was used to winning in a certain way and dominating a certain way. Like, Alabama is a very talented team.
Sure.
But if you took this team and its talent relative to the other teams it has to play and compared it to the 2012 Alabama team and the talent relative to the teams that, it's not even close. It's nothing. It's not even the same sport. So that's the part that, and Alabama fans are going to have to get used to that. And I don't know that that's necessarily all Kalen DeBoer, but look, Kalen DeBoer did it with, well, I'm not going to say less talent at Washington, because he had an incredibly talented team last year at Washington.
And Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk and Michael Penix, that passing offense was better than what Alabama has now. But somehow,
and Roger Rosengarten they had a lot of really good players.
Jeremy Bernard was Washington's like 4th best receiver last year, and he's Alabama's second.
And he's Alabama's second best. Yes, exactly.
So the other two are in the pros.
Yeah. But
what do you mean? The Washington guys
last year? Yeah. I mean,
we're saying Washington. Washington last year was pretty loaded.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't. Yeah. So
they were super old too. They were even older than Michigan was.
Yeah, Doug, and go ahead, Ari.
You are fine tooth combing these programs up north. We did a Wendy Saucy Nugget hot take from me, where I said that no team will make the semifinal that isn't in the Big Ten or the SEC. And that everybody said was like a naked take, like there was no spice to it at all. Are there any programs in your mind that you truthfully believe that aren't in the SEC or the Big Ten that have a legitimate chance, or your expectation is that they could make it to the college football playoff semifinal?
Expectation is probably too strong. I do think Iowa State is super interesting. I think Iowa State is very fundamentally sound, and they've had a gazillion injuries at linebacker and have been fighting through that. They have a pretty good secondary. They have a way of doing business with John Haycock as the defensive coordinator there, but then they're also explosive. And when you saw their comeback last week, Rocco Becht making plays, and Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins as a receiver combo are as good as any receiver combo in the country, I would say, at least close. So I do think it is an interesting, and Matt Campbell's just like, boom, right? Culture, fundamentals, you've got it nailed.
Well, his clock management at the end of that game was flawless.
They can chuck it on you too. Like they won some of these games because when they get hit with something, they answer with a 75-yard bomb because they have two receivers who are hard.
That's what they did against Iowa. That's how they won the Iowa game.
How they won. I mean, they hit a 25-yard wheel route down the sideline with 30 seconds left against like an Iowa All Big Ten corner. Like it is like, so that combination is super interesting to me. And I am very much looking forward to Farmageddon. Last game of the regular season, Kansas State at Iowa State is going to be huge. And I do think Kansas State with DJ Giddens is a monster at running back, and Avery Johnson as a second-year player, first-year starter at quarterback, who was a big-time recruit. He's the biggest recruit probably in Kansas State modern college football history, and they kept him home. Really dangerous runner, but is elevating and ascending as a passer. And then it's like, okay, like how good might he be? Kansas State interests me too. And then BYU, it's like you do a disservice to BYU. I've been comparing BYU to TCU. And that was TCU actually the second best team 2 years ago? I don't think anybody would say yes.
No, they were very talented, but but they weren't.
Like, what's the point? What's the argument? Like, is BYU one of the 4 best teams? No, I don't know. Have you watched this team? Jake Retzlaff is nuts. They made a ton of plays at the end against Oklahoma State. Kalani Sitake
I think
is
Provo's
totally
too far
calm.
south to be one of your teams, by the way, Doug.
No. It's in the mountains. Now look at you.
I realize it's got
desperate.
snow, but this is way south.
The SEC is so down. You are trying to claim BYU. You're in desperate straits, brother.
I mean, if
I got a latitude. We're good.
I don't know. I need to check that line of latitude on Provo. That's really close. That's really close.
You're trying to steal Provo from him.
Steal Provo. You want Lincoln Riley? We don't claim USC and UCLA, so you can have Lincoln Riley.
Well, we want Jake Retzlaff. That's who we want. He's from Riverside, California, Doug.
Well, that's the whole point. You've got to get some players from down there, and you've got to lure them to the north with all the opportunities that are provided up here. Guess what? As you said, all the NFL teams are in the north. Like, come up here and get used to playing football this way.
Our producer River, who's a Tennessee native, would like you to take the whole state of Kentucky. He has requested
no, we don't
that you just take the whole state of Kentucky.
If Kentucky were good, Doug, I'm going to ask you an honest question, and I'm putting you on the spot. If Kentucky was
people
good,
who are actually from the South think Lexington and Louisville are northern cities. So
how if somebody explained to me from a geographical standpoint how Lexington and Louisville are not northern teams?
If you belong to a conference that has the word Southeastern in its name, we don't want you.
I mean, it's also the Confederacy. Also,
if Kentucky were good, would you claim them?
No, we maybe would claim Louisville. The teams that were on the border for us, honestly,
very close to Indiana.
Were Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Missouri. Those are like geographically the closest.
Oh, you definitely would have taken Mizzou. That's like St. Louis.
But they made their bed. They picked the Southeast Conference. So I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
They chose it already. So now if you want to come crawling back, Missouri, we'll think about it. But if they were still in the Big 12, we'd take them. But you chose to be in the SEC.
Did you think?
I don't know. I think the South should get BYU. Like, you can take Utah because they're a little north.
Why don't you call up Kirby and ask him if BYU's in the South?
Oh no!
Did you think that they would be taking Provo from you today?
I can't. I knew you guys were desperate because it's not going so great down there.
I just need to draw that. I want to see that line of latitude.
Hey, don't put me into this. I'm an innocent bystander.
I don't know what to tell you, man. You are kind of an innocent bystander here. This is very hard. This is like.
Are you guys claiming Colorado? Are you claiming Coach Prime?
Claiming Colorado? It's in the mountains, Andy. Yes, we claim Colorado.
But Boulder is if you extend the Mason-Dixon line, Boulder is actually below it.
We have a latitude. I can send you. You can watch the first show. I explained this whole thing. It really is geographic. We're not like it's not a lot of swerving. Like there's a line, but if it snows, I had the whole thing. I had average temperature in November. I have
if it snows, then you can have North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky all you want.
No, it doesn't. When it snows in North Carolina, people drive off the road. No. And we're definitely not taking Texas because we know that if it snows there, the whole state shuts down.
Texas isn't even the South. Texas is just Texas.
You took them.
But if he has a line.
You want Texas until they lose to Georgia. That's so SEC
of
you.
I'm not speaking as someone who went to an SEC school. I'm speaking as someone who grew up in the actual like deep South. Like it's not. Texas is a different place.
We just went like this. We took a map and we went like this and we cut it in half. So we took
with
the
sword,
and you can have the bottom. That's all.
I don't know. I'm gonna call Jake Ratzliff and see how. Do you feel Southern or Northern, Jake? Just tell us. One
He's from
question.
California.
Don't explain it to him. Just say it.
Yeah, he feels not. Yeah, he would feel neither. And we count California is kind of like its own thing. So we don't take Cal, we don't take Stanford, we don't want USC and UCLA. But also, I'm not pretending that USC and UCLA have anything in common with LSU and Texas A&M.
You didn't want Cal just a little bit when they beat Auburn?
No, I'm over that thing. That Cal Twitter.
It raises the academic profile and everything.
But no, we're good on academics, Andy. Like the North has it. We're fine. We don't need Cal for that. Also, like we celebrate. Part of the thing we do here is we celebrate and contextualize Northern college football, and we tell the South to cram it. So we don't have to take Cal to enjoy Auburn losing. We had plenty of fun. Check his phone, man.
That's just a freebie.
Hughes' phone. Yeah. We root for Southern chaos at all times.
That's just a classic ACC SEC matchup that you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. Throw out the record books.
We weren't thrilled with Stanford beating Syracuse. That was a tough one. I can't believe Syracuse should be undefeated.
You got to cover LKO Manor with more than one person.
Horrible.
When I was growing up, my parents never fought in front of me.
Yeah.
Like ever. Yeah. Like I had a very sheltered childhood. Like I really did.
They got real for you here, brother.
That was brutal for me. Yeah, that was. I was just sitting up in the corner. I didn't know what to do.
I need a weapon for this show, Ari. Like I love the sword concept. This is awesome.
Southern weapon. I don't even want to go for.
I do have two swords, so you can borrow one, Andy. When we see in the playoff,
Ari says a Southern weapon, so I'm thinking a bucket of fried chicken is probably the way to go. It's the best weapon we have.
I actually will say that, like, I am skeptical. Like, you would be proud of me, Doug, because if you look at my top 10 every week, like I have BYU and Iowa State represented. Like I didn't put LSU ahead of them because I actually think that what those teams have done this year is more impressive than what LSU has done. Like I think that you were the first person who taught me how to vote in the AP poll, and I still kind of view it that way. That said, I would be a liar if I said I was not at least a little skeptical of like Iowa State lining up on the same field as average LSU team and like being
well, I'll say this, and look, Iowa State hasn't lost yet, but I saw UCF in person a few weeks ago. You should not be in a game with UCF in the fourth quarter.
UCF is now
favored playing for the national title.
What about Kentucky? Should you be in a game with Kentucky in the fourth quarter when it's 13-12?
Absolutely not.
Like Georgia was? Okay, just checking. I'm just checking. We apply it equally. Okay.
You should also punt against Georgia when it's fourth and never mind.
Every Northern team that's undefeated has played a really close game. Iowa State and BYU just had great comebacks. Penn State had to come back on USC and force overtime and win in overtime in that game. Pitt's had two crazy comebacks against West Virginia and Cincinnati. They're not perfect, but all I'm saying is you were very quick to apply.
So wait, Penn State doesn't stink because they needed overtime to beat 4-loss USC? They don't stink because of that?
They didn't lose. I'm just saying Tennessee stinks because they actually lost to Arkansas and also needed overtime against Florida. So like, that's what I'm talking about. So like, again, are we going to apply? If we're going to apply the close call thing, I get it, but let's also apply the actually losing thing. And let's also apply who'd you beat?
Okay. So you realize all of these teams we're talking about, well, not all of them, but a lot of these teams we talk about are going to make the playoff and they're just going to play.
I know. That's why I'm living in today, and I'm excited about it. So to come on, if we want to come on and talk about the past, that's fine. But yes, this is actually, Andy, the best time to talk about it because we're going to have answers, and then we're going to have answers. Yeah. And then next year, if you say to me, "Oh, well, the South and North played in the playoff 5 times, and the South won 4," I'm going to have much less to come back with, right?
No, you're going to say I'm living in the past if I say that.
but I do think, do we not acknowledge that the portal and NIL have changed things? And Saban leaving.
I told you it would happen. Doug, I was writing it back during the O'Bannon trial. Like, because the economists who were working for the plaintiffs were like, you do realize if you pay the players, it will not benefit just the teams at the top. Like, it'll spread things out better.
Yeah. I think the South underestimated losing Nick Saban. Because really, you can't do it. But if you take Alabama out of the South
you think of the South as a monolith, which I realize is a great conceit for your show, but that's not how it actually works. Like Auburn people were thrilled Nick Saban left because now he's not at Alabama anymore. Like Mississippi State people were thrilled Nick Saban left.
It is the only conference though that chants the conference's name at games.
It is.
Right.
I can tell you
I would
exactly
like
when
to
that
change that.
happened. I will tell you exactly when that happened. It was in front of Jarvis Moss's locker after Florida beat Ohio State in the national title game, because and nobody remembers this anymore. But that entire year, the run up to that entire year was Ohio State and Michigan, the two best teams in the country. And whoever wins that game is going to win the national title. I know you were.
Yeah.
But in the SEC, it was like, oh, there are a bunch of also-rans. And so when Jarvis Moss said there were 5 teams in the SEC better than Ohio State, which probably wasn't true, but he said it. That's when that legend, that's when that began.
They still do it like for 20 years.
Oh, yeah, they do it now. Well, now it's become a thing. But it's interesting because I feel like it's more like South Carolina, Mississippi State, those fans that are just kind of clinging to it rather than the ones that actually do the winning of the things.
But I don't think Northwestern fans cling to Ohio State's accomplishments. And I think that's yeah.
But I want them to shout.
Big Ten is also very tough to chant. It's not very lyrical.
How about KOTN? KOTN. We can do that.
KOTN. KOTN.
We've got a chant for you.
You can do B1G.
B1G. B1G. That would work. That would work.
But even that, and that's true. That's the whole thing, right? It's like Urban Meyer, son of the North, Nick Saban, son of the North,
Ohio.
By the way. So
is West
you guys want to
North?
I'm sure. Yes, we take West Virginia North. It's no.
What was West Virginia?
West Virginia's north. West Virginia's north. Yeah. Yeah. We were excited about West Virginia, and that has not worked out very well.
Is West Virginia geographically in the South in a textbook?
No, I mean, geographically it's not.
Morgantown, West Virginia is probably both, but the Morgantown is north. Morgantown
and West Virginia was a border state in the in the Civil War, so it was split allegiances. But yes, Morgantown is 45 minutes from Pittsburgh.
But Nick Saban's a son of the North.
Yeah. So you guys want to start the Saban to WVU hashtag? We're trying to get that going. Urban.
Jimbo's sitting right there. Come on.
Son of Ohio. So Urban come SEC, burns out, does TV for a year, goes back to coach his home state school. Saban, SEC, does TV for a year.
I think you're more likely to get Jimbo.
You want Jimbo?
if you're gonna have a West Virginia native coming back, I think that's more likely.
What washed out SEC team coach? That's
hey, Rich Rod's killing it at Jacksonville State, right?
We get Brian Harsin back up there.
Rich Rod to Michigan equals Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. That's been my comparison. Good coach, bad fit.
We shall see. Doug, it has been a pleasure. We're gonna have you back on.
Do you actually you enjoyed that?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't.
Did you not?
It's not. I loved it, but I love to fight with everybody. So I'm sorry if Ari was uncomfortable, but I think you guys do a great show.
I was hoping that we would talk more, but I had a feeling
shouting.
it was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is good. I think you guys do a great show, and it is a large college football landscape, and we're just trying to get a little slice of the pie here at KOTN.
But you're slicing it with swords, and that's the best part.
Yeah. That's the bad. There's pie on this sword right now. I'm going to lick it off as soon as I leave the show.
I think I want a sword just to cut cake and pie with now.
We gotta get a weapon.
We do.
These are real swords. I went to a Renaissance fair, to a sword store. This is not some like strip mall sword.
To an actual blacksmith who made you a sword, an armorer.
It was an armorer. The guy who sold me this was wearing chainmail. So like, this is the real deal.
That is beautiful. All right, we are taking suggestions in the chat. What should the official weapon of the show be?
Oh,
we're open to suggestion.
Frank's
Doug,
only allowed to have a slingshot. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, fellas.
Welcome back. That's Doug Lesmerises. I could argue with him for a solid 3-4 hours, and we may actually do that. You like that, huh? You like how smooth that was, that transition? I'm glad. Now, time for your assignment. We got a Dear Andy and Ari show on Thursday. Your questions drive the show. We love your brilliant minds. We love the way you think, and we love when you help guide our discussions on the show. So let's send some questions in. You know where to find me, Andy at Ari Wasserman on Twitter and Instagram. You can also send me an email. Andy, let us know. What do you want to know about? What do you want us to talk about? We've already gotten a few questions earlier in the week. Some of you guys Monday hit me up on Tuesday to make sure I have seen your question. But listen, I'm here for all the last minute stragglers. So get those questions in. Ari and I will answer them on Thursday's show. We've also got your definitive preview of LSU and Texas A&M on Thursday's show, because that is going to be a banger of a game this week. This is Thursday night. We got UNLV and Boise State in Vegas on Friday, plus the Rutgers USC late night. You know, it's basically like getting Waffle House after the bars, essentially. That's what that is. And then you've got a full slate on Saturday. It's going to be incredible. Get those questions into us at Andy_Staples on social media, at Ari Wasserman on social media, AndyStaples on 3 at gmail.com. Fire away. We'll talk to you tomorrow.